welcome to this explainer. Honestly, the story we're diving into today, it literally feels like it was ripped straight out of a high-octane 90s action thriller. We're going back in time to unpack the rise and fall of one of the absolute most notorious highway robbers in history, Tharpai Morrigan. Throughout this explainer, we're going to walk through the astonishing mechanics of his heists, the truly terrifying escalation of his crimes, and ultimately, the intense psychological price he ended up paying. So let's just dive right into it.
Okay, picture this. It's the 1990s, down in Tamil Nadu. At the famous Samyahapuram Mariamman temple, you have hundreds of women, all dressed in these vibrant red and yellow saris, gathered together. And they are praying intensely, making this sacred vow. Their one singular prayer, that their husbands survive to the age of 60 without facing a sudden, violent death. Now, looking at that, you'd be completely forgiven for thinking these women were married to soldiers deployed to some brutal war zone. I mean, what kind of incredible danger could possibly drive hundreds of women to pray just for their husband's basic survival?
But here's the crazy twist. These guys, they weren't in the military. They were completely ordinary citizens. They were lorry drivers. Back in the 90s, well before those massive steel container trucks were everywhere, these men were the absolute backbone of the economy. They drove standard lorries, basically covered by nothing but some tarpaulin and a few ropes. And these wives, they weren't terrified of road accidents. No, they were terrified of what was lurking in the shadows of the highways, targeting the cargo their husbands were hauling. They were terrified of a man who brought an entirely new, deeply terrifying breed of robbery to the state. Section 1. A taste of easy wealth. Origin of the crime.
The sheer economic contrast here is just staggering. We're talking about a 27-year-old guy from Chekkanarani in Madurai named Murugan. He was uneducated, deeply impoverished, and managed to scrape by getting a job as a lorry cleaner, earning a meager 20 rupees a day. But the lorries he worked on? They were carrying the future. Mixies, fridges, and most importantly, brand new computers rolling out from the Chennai harbor. One day, a driver he was working with casually stole a few watches from the cargo and just handed Murugan 200 rupees to keep his mouth shut. I mean, think about that. That's 10 days' wages handed to him in a split second. But Murugan, he thought bigger. He partnered up with another cleaner, faked a loose rope on a moving lorry, and tossed out just 2 boxes of cargo. Inside, computers.
And that was his ultimate turning point. Murugan sold those 2 stolen computers and netted a mind-blowing 30,000 rupees. In a single night, he multiplied his daily wage of 20 rupees by 1,500 times. For a guy who had literally nothing, this wasn't just a payday, it was an intoxicating revelation. It sparked this absolute insatiable greed that was about to change those highways forever.
Section 2. The tree-jumping highwaymen, a daring tactic.
You know the saying, right? A cat that's tasted cream isn't going to settle for milk anymore. Well, Murugan wasn't going to be just a simple opportunist anymore. He goes back to his village, recruits a gang of 10 unemployed guys, and develops a robbery method so incredibly daring, it sounds like a Hollywood stunt. So historically, these beautiful massive shade trees were planted along Indian highways. Murugan used this ancient infrastructure against modern commerce. He'd find a stretch of highway where the road was super badly damaged, forcing the lorries to slow down to a crawl. Step 1, his gang, armed with knives, climbs high up into the canopy of these trees. Step 2, Murugan sits in a tree 200 feet up the road, waits for the dead of night, and flashes a torchlight to signal his guys when a loaded lorry is coming. Step 3, as the lorry creeps over the potholes, his men literally drop from the branches right onto the roof of the moving truck. Step 4, in a matter of seconds, they slice open the tarpaulin, hurl the expensive boxes down to the roadside, and jump off into the pitch darkness before the driver even knows what hit them. It was perfectly executed, ghost-like efficiency.
Section 3. Escalation to organized murder, the dark turn. But, as we all know, unchecked greed always demands more. As police patrols slowly started catching on to these tree-jumping tactics, Murugan had to adapt. And this adaptation is exactly where the story shifts from a fascinating heist to a deeply terrifying nightmare. Murugan bribes an informant at the harbor to tell him exactly which trucks were carrying the highest value electronics. Then he goes out and buys his own mini lorry. In the pitch black of midnight, Murugan would completely turn off his headlights and tailgate a massive cargo lorry, keeping just a few feet of distance between them. Just think about the precision and the madness of that for a second. His men would literally leap across the gap from their moving mini lorry to the cargo truck, throw the goods back across the void into their own vehicle, and leap back.
Now here is the crucial moment, the inciting incident that pushed this gang past the point of no return. One night, that informant tips them off about a massive haul of computers.
Murugan realizes that just stealing a few boxes out the back isn't going to cut it this time. The total cargo was worth an earth-shattering 8 crore rupees. To take all of it, throwing boxes into the dark wasn't going to work. They needed the entire truck.
To secure that 8 crore haul, Murugan's gang forced the truck to stop, and without a second of hesitation, they murdered the driver and the cleaner. They took the entire lorry. And because it yielded such massive wealth, it actually became their new standard operating procedure. This is the dark reality that connects us straight back to where we started. This is exactly why those hundreds of wives were weeping and praying at the temple. Murugan had turned the highways into an absolute slaughterhouse just to ensure there were 0 witnesses left behind.
Section 4. The Ambush and Retribution. Owners fight back.
So the police are entirely baffled by the sheer scale of these highway vanishings, but the lorry owners, the guys actually losing their cargo, their trucks, and their men, they decided they were absolutely not going to wait for the law. They pulled their resources together and executed this brilliant, brutal counter-operation. They went out and hired 11 professional hitmen. They loaded up a lorry normally, but instead of cargo, they hid these 11 armed assassins completely silently underneath the tarpaulin. Later that night, right on schedule, Murugan's gang takes the bait. They ambush the truck, and Murugan jumps into the back, totally expecting boxes of electronics. Instead, 11 men stand up wielding machetes.
The hitmen relentlessly stab Murugan and just throw his bleeding body onto the side of the highway, totally assuming he's dead. But fate played a very, very strange card that night. A passing sub-inspector finds him, assumes he's just some innocent victim of a highway robbery, and rushes him to the hospital. Now remember, because Murugan had spent years literally jumping between trees and moving trucks, the guy was in absolute peak physical condition. Against all medical odds, after 6 grueling months in a Chennai private hospital, he survives. And he used every second of that time to plot a terrifying revenge.
If you ever want to understand the terrifying logistical capability of Murugan, we just need to track his timeline for revenge. He tasks his partner to track down the men who ambushed him. It took 1 month to locate all 11 hitmen. In 1 day, Murugan uses his massive pile of stolen wealth to hire 44 killers of his own. That is a devastating 4-to-1 ratio, by the way. And then, in exactly 1 hour, in a highly coordinated strike straight out of a military playbook, all 11 of the original hitmen were assassinated simultaneously across different locations. It was a show of absolute chilling dominance.
Section 5. The Prison of the Mind. The Final Escape.
As you can imagine, the simultaneous murder of 11 people sent complete shockwaves across the state. The police manhunt became incredibly intense. But Murugan, always calculating, decides to outsmart the system one last time. Instead of running, he just walks right into the police station and surrenders. In court, he played the part of a repentant man perfectly. He confessed, promised he was going to change his ways, and begged for mercy. And it worked. The judge, hoping for rehabilitation, handed down a remarkably lenient 8-year sentence. And because he was a model prisoner, Murugan was released in just 5 years. On paper, he had completely beaten the system. He was a free man who had gotten away with dozens of murders with barely a slap on the wrist. But true consequence isn't always delivered by a judge.
When Murugan walked out of those prison gates, he brought his demons right out with him. He had been responsible for over 50 brutal murders, and once he was back in the quiet of regular life, his mind completely shattered. As the source material notes, while sleeping and awake, he started murmuring like robbing and murdering. The adrenaline was gone, and only the horrors remained.
His family, terrified of what he had become, rushed him to hospitals, but honestly, no doctor could cure the immense psychological trauma he had inflicted upon himself. Tharpai Mirgan, the mastermind who outran the police, the guy who outsmarted the courts, spent his final days trapped in severe mental agony, completely a prisoner to his own memories. He died in 2002, destroyed not by the law, but by the unbearable weight of his own actions.
Which really leaves us with this final, powerful takeaway to consider. We so often look at the justice system as the ultimate arbiter of consequence, right? But Murugan's story shows us something way deeper. He beat the courts, he survived the brutal ambushes, and he accumulated unimaginable wealth. Yet his final years were spent in an inescapable psychological prison. It really begs the question, if the ultimate punishment is built entirely within the architecture of our own minds, can anyone truly ever escape the consequences of a violent life? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.